nothing to put a roof over your head. And everybody faces having to either build a savings account or buy a house, buy a car, just day-to-day spending. So we all have to deal with this. Finances means what kind of money you're bringing in, but more importantly, what are you spending it on? What are you using your money for? And we're going to work through three examples, then I'm going to give you the practice to do at home. But our first problem in finances says Maria spends $20 every week on coffee and spends $130 every month on food. Now notice there's two different time periods here. 20 bucks a week on coffee. Now that probably to some of you sounds a little outrageous, especially if you make your coffee at home. Okay? My guilty pleasure, I'm sure you have to do, my guilty pleasure is Starbucks. Yes, I make Starbucks coffee at home. I have their bag coffees I buy in the grocery store. But when I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, the last thing on my mind is setting up a coffee pot and brewing some coffee. You know, I'm doing good to get up, get a shower, and get out the door. Make sure my dogs didn't run off when I let them out to the potty. So I spend probably every day, I spend at least $2 at Starbucks at Ingalls and Jonesboro on a cup of coffee. I take into account I could buy a bag of Starbucks coffee for, if it's on sale, about $7. If it's not on sale, about $8 or $9. But I spend $2 a cup on coffee. Okay, and I'm not bragging, I'm actually confessing here. I mean, they know me so well at Starbucks and the vet's office, they can tell who it is when I call. Because I spend so much money at both places. So it's not unreasonable that she spends $20 every week on coffee, because my morning coffee fix costs me $2 every day. At least. So that's $14 a week. Now I don't always go there on Saturday. I usually do on Sunday because I have to stay awake for church, you know. But Monday through Friday alone, that's $10 a week that I spend on coffee. Okay? Now, for some of you, it might not be coffee. For some of you, it might be that drive through the fast food lane to pick up lunch or dinner or whatever. It may be something else. You know, maybe you get your nails done once a month. Maybe you like to go bowling every week. Everybody's got their own guilty pleasure. The first thing we're going to talk about here is to compute the total cost per year of each of Maria's expenses. So here's what we've got. If we talk about Marie's coffee habit, she spends $20 a week on coffee. How much does Maria spend in a year on coffee? How would we figure that out?
Multiply it by 52.
That's right, there's 52 weeks in a year. Somebody else, Brent. So there's 52 weeks in a year. There's 12 months in a year. She spends $20 a week on coffee. That means she spends $1,040 a year on coffee. And she also spends $130 a month on food. Now that's something we kind of can't get out of. We're kind of stuck on that. So she spends $1,560 on food, groceries. What do you think about Maria's priorities?
I think the caffeine's an appetite suppressant because she's not eating enough.
That's a good interpretation.
And nothing.
Do that when her priorities are in the right place.
Yeah,
Either that or her priorities are in the right place. But I mean, you know, look, she spends almost as much on coffee as she does on groceries for the whole year.
She must be going to Starbucks like 10 times a day.
No.
No, she's.
Nah.
Starbucks like 10 times a day.
No, trust me, I spend $20 a week on coffee. And I actually only go, you know, at the most, a couple of times a day. It's worse in the summertime because I drink the Starbucks cold brew. And for the Grande Starbucks cold brew, it's probably about $3.
Yeah, they're about $4 or $5.
Yeah. So yeah, she could easily, you know, and I easily spend that much. In fact, the reason I get my Starbucks coffee at Ingles is because I get gas points for buying my coffee. So it actually, I tell myself I'm balancing it out. Okay? I'm getting a discount on my gas for buying my coffee at Ingles. Yeah, I know, I lie to myself. So, complete the sentence. On an annual basis, the first set of expenses is what percent of the second set? Well, on an annual basis, her first expense is coffee. Her second expense is food. So ultimately, the first set of expenses is 66.7%. Of her second set of expenses. Okay? She spends 66.7% on coffee as opposed to what she spends on groceries. Okay? That's a lot. Now, in the second problem, we have something else that probably most of you can identify with. Credit card expenses. Cassidy has recently begun to keep her spending under better control, but she still can't fully pay off her credit card. She's maintaining an average monthly balance of about $1,100, and her card charges 24% annual interest on that card. And that's what a lot of credit card interest can be, especially if you've got like a Lowe's card, Walmart card, one of those. You're really, really, really better off getting like just your standard plain vanilla Visa card from your bank or something like that. Because those store credit cards have outrageous interest rates. Well, she's maintaining that balance at a 24% annual interest rate. That means that it bills at a rate of 2% per month. So what they do with a credit card is they take your balance for the current month and charge you 2% interest each month on that balance. Now, the part you don't think about is that they charge you 2% interest, and then they take the interest out of your payment, so your whole payment doesn't go to the balance of your credit card. In fact, at 24%, most of it goes to interest. Okay? Big chunk of it goes to interest. How much is she spending on credit card interest a month? Okay, at 2%, she's spending $22 a month just on interest on her credit card. Now, annually, in truth, that kind of varies a little bit because part of that interest, it depends on what her actual payment was. If she only paid $25 a month, she's only putting $3 toward that balance of $1,100 each month. So that's dwindling pretty slowly. If she actually pays $50 or $60 a month, then that balance is coming down every month. But let's assume that all she pays is the interest and she really doesn't pay anything for the principal. Here's what happens. So if she doesn't pay down on her balance at all, she spends $264 a month on just interest. I'm sorry, a year, not a month.
Just spends that a year.
Sorry, yes, a year. Well, it's $264 per year, assuming that all she pays is the interest each month. She doesn't pay anything toward the principal. Okay? Now, if Cassidy was in Maria's boat, that's 2 months worth of groceries. Okay? Or 2 weeks worth of groceries at least. Now, we're going to talk about prorating expenses, but not just yet. What do I do with my first page? Just press my first page. Okay, what you've got to do for your practice is you're gonna compute the total cost per year of each of these expenses. And on an annual basis, the first set of expenses is what percent of the second set of expenses. Now, I'll work through the first one with you, but after that, you're gonna do 2, 3, and 4 for your homework tonight. Jeremy buys the New York Times from the newsstand for $1 a day. And he skips on Sundays. And he spends $20 a week on gas. Now, if Jeremy lives in Johnson City, you know, does he really need to spend $1 a day on the New York Times? That's the question. Because we're gonna assume that Jeremy has to drive back to work too, okay? So, he buys it for $1 a day except for Sundays. Okay. How are we gonna figure out how much he spends a year or a week? But let's keep it consistent, because he spends $20 a week on gas. What does he spend a week on the New York Times? $6. $6. So, what percentage of what he spends on the New York Times, what percentage of the amount he spends on gas is it? Well, if he spends $6 a week on the New York Times, and he spends $20 a week on gas, the relative proportion is 30%. His newspaper habits costing him 30% of what his gas costs him, basically. And then you do the same thing with the next 3 problems. Any questions so far? Okay, let's say that you maintain an average balance of $650 on your credit card. Now that's, you know, that's not all that much. That's not that high a credit card balance. But your credit card has an 18% annual interest rate. What is the monthly interest on your credit card? Well, your balance is $650. Your interest is 18%. So your 18% divided by 12 months in a year is 1.5. And that's your monthly interest rate. So you're going to take 1.5%, which is $650, times 0.015. Remember to change your percent back to a decimal properly. That means it goes, whoop, whoop. You have to put in a 0. $9.75. So if all you pay is just the interest on your credit card, you don't ever actually pay anything on the principal, think about this. You pay $117 a year just to carry that card around in your pocket, assuming you don't use it and all you do is pay the interest. You're paying $117 a year just to have it in your pocket. And not to have to pay that initial $650. Brooks credit card has an annual interest rate of 21%. And her unpaid balance averages $900 a month. So again, same thing. And you can do this all in one step. So 21% divided by 12 months is 1.75% per month. That's $1,575 a year she's paying to carry that card around. Okay? Now our third example.
Can you go back just a second?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay? We're going to talk about prorating expenses. Prorating is where instead of making like a whole payment, if you can't pay the whole thing at once, they take a portion of it. They kind of divide it up. So let's say in addition to your monthly expenses, you have the following college expenses that you pay twice a year. And you're paying $3,500 for your tuition every semester, which is not unreasonable if you look at the cost of tuition at most colleges and universities, in Tennessee at least. You're paying $750 in student fees each semester, and again, that's not unreasonable depending on where you're going. And you're paying $500 for textbooks every semester. And yeah, that's probably pretty reasonable. You have to pay an additional $120 for your parking pass to park on campus each year. Not here, but go to UT. Here, you're paying like $5. UT, you're paying $250 a year to park. And you still have to hike about 3 miles to get to your classes. How should you handle these expenses when you compute your monthly budget? In other words, how much a month do you need to be setting aside for these expenses? So this gets to budgeting. Okay, for tuition. You pay $3,500 a semester. Now here's the question. Are you going to school 2 semesters a year? Spring and fall, right? So 2 semesters means you're paying $7,000 a year in tuition. And if you want to know about your monthly budget, then you're going to divide that $7,000 by 12 months in a year. And you need to set aside, just for your college tuition, $583.33. Your student fees are $750. But again, if you're going to school for 2 semesters a year, that's $1,500. So you're spending $125 a month on your student fees. You're spending $500 for textbooks. But again, assuming you go 2 semesters a year, that's $1,000. So you're spending $83.33 a month on textbooks. And then you have to actually pay an additional $120 for a parking pass, assuming you're not going to Northeast State, the nice, affordable community college, but to UT or Austin P or one of the bigger universities. UT's probably the most expensive. If you're spending $120 on parking, and that's, now notice here it says $120 per year, okay, not per semester, per year. So we don't need to multiply here. That's $10 a month, okay? So when you start, you can look at annual amounts and they seem pretty staggering. You need to look at your monthly amount, or, sometimes if you're paid once a week or every 2 weeks, you need to prorate it according to how much out of each paycheck you have to pay. So that's just a quick introduction to your own personal finances and things for you to think about, okay? Now we're also going to go ahead and do lesson 2. Lesson 1's pretty short. And if you don't have your calculator on this one, you're going to want to use the one on the computer, because all of lesson 2, I do not expect you to do with any kind of formulas. I'm not showing you any kind of formulas. I'm going to show you how to plug it all in on your calculator. So you need to have your calculator handy. So the first thing we're going to talk about in Unit 2, Lesson 2 is simple interest. We're gonna be talking about savings accounts, annuities, revolving credit accounts, which is what your credit card is. And there's a difference in simple and compound interest. Now, truthfully, simple interest is not what most banks charge you. Most banks charge you compound interest. If you're a member of a credit union, credit unions very often charge you simple interest, which is a lot cheaper than compound interest. For example, I have a mortgage to the Bank of Tennessee. They charge me compound interest, which means most of my house payment every month goes to paying the interest rather than the principal at this point, because I'm only like 2 years into my mortgage. But my car is financed through a savings and loan or credit union. So when I go to the TVA Federal Employees Credit Union and make my car payment, they charge me simple interest, which means that they took my car payment amount or my total amount for my car, including all the taxes and everything. They charged me a flat percentage rate, which I think was like 2%. Added that onto the amount that they loaned me and then divided it up by the number of payments. My house payment doesn't work that way. Most of my house payment goes toward actually paying off the interest on the house, and very little goes to the principal right now. Whereas my car payment, the same amount every month goes to paying off my car, and a lesser amount goes to paying off the interest. This is not a finance function on your calculator. Everything else we're going to do except simple interest. Simple interest is going to be the one exception. It is not on the finance function on your calculator, so remember that. You will need one formula, and this is it. Interest is equal to the principal, or the amount that you started out, either borrowing or saving, times the interest rate, times the time. And the time has to be in years. Okay? Time is always counted in years. So for example, let's suppose that Trevor invests $1,000 in an account and it earns simple interest, not compound interest. Simple interest at an annual rate of 5% a year. And if Trevor was lucky enough to find someplace to pay him 5% interest, I'd say he must have done. Because 5% is a pretty high interest rate for savings these days. How much interest does Trevor earn if he leaves the money alone for a year? He puts the money in, doesn't touch it, forgets it's there, comes back a year later. How much money is he going to have? And then what about for 2 years? What about for 3 years? Find the accumulated balance in each period. Well, his period is a year. And that's actually what they're going to pay him on interest. They're going to pay him once a year. If he puts the money in the bank July 1st, 2017, then July 1st, 2018, they will give him all the interest that he's earned over the year. Okay? So don't add it every month. They're only going to compound it once a year because T is the time in years. So this is Trevor's principal. This is how much he started out with. So his interest equals his principal times the interest rate as a decimal be sure you change your decimal correctly. That's 0.05. times the time in years. So that's gonna be for this one, 1 year. So he's gonna make $50 in interest for the first year. Now, if he leaves his money alone, again, he doesn't add any extra to that, he leaves his money alone, then it's gonna be, instead of 1 year, it's gonna be 2 years. And if you hit your second enter button on your calculator, you can change that 1 to a 2.
So we don't add the $50 in the first year?
Nope.
Okay.
In simple interest, they don't give you interest on the interest you've already earned. They just leave that aside, and they're only paying you interest on the principal amount. So at the end of the year, he made $100 for both years. And then 3 years, he's made $150. And his accumulated balance at the end of the first year then is $1,050. At the end of 2 years, he would have accumulated $1,100. And at the end of 3 years, he would have $1,150 in the bank. Okay? That's how simple interest works. Simple interest is actually pretty easy to figure out. You have your amount that you put in to start with, your interest rate, and then you multiply it times how many times they compounded. In this case, it's once a year for a year. This is once a year, 2 years. This is once a year for 3 years. Okay? Now, realistically, this does not happen very often.
Yeah. I know in car loans, the car loans and these are usually simple interest loans,
Mm-hmm.
but they front load the entire loan with interest.
Yeah.
So like the first 3 years, you're almost paying 95, between 95 and 80% interest.
Yeah.
And like the last 2 years is where you start paying the principal, so they get their money first
Right.
as your car devalues.
Right. That's actually, and that's not simple interest, that's actually compound interest. That's what they're doing.
Well, yeah, well, that's, yeah, that's it's weird, they calculate it simple, they take it out as if it's compound. That's like.
Yeah, the way my,
Right.
the way my car payment worked at TVA Credit Union is I paid, I'm trying to think now, I think I paid $13,000 for my car. So then they charged me 2% interest on my $13,000. So that's like $2,600. And then they added $13,000 plus $2,600, and my loan, they divided it up into 12 payments. So basically, I'm paying the same amount to the principal and the interest every month.
Yes, Ford Auto Finance, they calculate your total, like what they're going to charge you using simple interest calculations. But then, the way they actually divide the payment up is like compound interest.
Yeah.
Or like in reverse,
Yeah,
so they get their money first.
yeah, they get their interest first,
Yeah.
then you get to pay for your car.
Yep.
Okay, what we're gonna talk about now is something called compound interest. Compound interest is paid both on the original price and on all the interest that's been added to the original principal. So in other words, you're getting paid interest on your interest, the dollar amount. Okay? And notice here it says when investing or depositing money into an account, your present value is the cash outflow. And thus it's negative. So when we do present value, it's always going to be negative. In those problems, there's a one-time deposit of cash and the payments are zero. So basically, N in this scenario is how many times does it compound? So how many times do you make payments or receive interest per year? And that's important. If you make semi-annual payments, that's 2 payments a year. So N would be 2. If you make monthly payments, that's 12 payments a year. So N would be 12. If you're going to do monthly for 5 years, that's going to be 12 payments a year times 5 years, which is going to be 60. Your interest percent on the calculator will be entered as a percent. Notice this says percent. It's not going to be a decimal. Now, your payment is going to be 0 in most cases, or left blank, because when we're talking about the first part of this, we're talking about making one payment, one initial deposit, and then adding nothing else to it. Or borrowing one amount and adding nothing else to it. The future value is how much do you have at the end? And it doesn't matter if you paid that money out or if you received it. That's the amount of money total at the end of all the compoundings. Now, your payments per year and your compoundings per year, and I'm going to mark out that 0, those are going to have to match. For example, if you take out a mortgage, I don't care where you take out the mortgage, even if it's credit union, you take out a mortgage, they're gonna compound your interest every month. And you're gonna make payments once a month. So your payments and your compounding period has to be the same. So let's look at an example of compound interest. And then we're gonna actually work through this on the calculator. Kendra invests $1,000. That's her present value. That's her upfront amount. She invests $1,000. In a savings account with an annual compounding rate of 6% a year. Okay, her compounding rate is 6%. And it's annual, so she's only going to get compounded once a year. And then at the end of the year, that payment amount is going to be her initial investment plus the interest on that first year. So you're going to get payments once a year, and that payment is the interest payment. Her number of payments is based on the fact that this is 5 years. She's going to leave it in there for 5 years, and they compound it annually for 5 years. So it's going to be 5 times. Okay? 5 times with 1 payment a year, 1 compounding per year. What you want to find is her balance at the end of 5 years, which is called the future value. And that's why it's called a future value, because 5 years from now is in the future. And her interest rate is 6%, so you enter that as 6, not 0.06. You actually enter it as a percentage rate. Now, the way you can do this on your calculator, here's your steps. On the TI-83, finance is above the x to the -1 key, right here. Right here. It's right above the x squared key. Okay? But notice that it's in yellow. And because it's in yellow, that means we have to press the yellow button first. Now, if you have a TI-84, let's see, let me remember where it is on my 84. Well, my 84 is not where I'm used to it being. This doesn't look like the same one I have at home, so y'all excuse me for a second, please. Okay, that was what I was looking for, and I'm not finding it on mine. Where? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Because my TI-83, you don't have, or my TI-84 I have at home is an older one, and it doesn't have the apps button. Okay, so on the TI-83, you press second and the X to the -1, and it takes you to solve. On the TI-84, and this is a TI-84 Plus, you press the apps button, which is this one right next to math. And the first one is finance. So what you want to do is hit enter when you get to finance. And there's your TVM solver. Okay? We're going to use TVM solver. Okay? Now, if you will look, looking for the handout. There is a calculator handout that's on your webpage in Shobi. I'll show you where that is. Your calculator help sheet shows you how to use the TVM solver, but you've got to remember how to get to the TVM solver based on what your calculator is. So I'm going to write down a couple things here. So on the TI-83, you press the second and the X to the -1 key. And that'll take you to the screen that you're seeing right here. If you have a TI-84, you're going to have to first press the apps key. And then choose finance. And then once you've done that, the screens are going to look the same. So the only difference is in how you actually get to this screen. Okay? So I'm going to start TVM solver on both of these. Now, the thing you're not going to worry about in either case is going to be whether the payments are at the beginning or the end. We're going to assume that it's going to be at the end in every case, so just leave that alone. Let it default to end. Okay? You have to know end. You have to know how many payments per year and how many compoundings per year. If you know those three things, and at least one of the others, then you can find any of the others. Okay? So in this case, I need to know the future value. I'm going to leave that blank, or I'm going to enter a 0 for the future value. I can also leave the payment blank because I'm not making payments. Okay? So what I'm going to enter in here is, this is compounded annually for 5 years. So I'm going to put in 5. And then use your arrow keys to move through. Your interest rate is 6%. Your present value is the amount of the initial deposit, which is $1,000. You're not making payments, so enter a 0. If it's not already a 0, enter a 0. Your future value is what you're looking for, so you enter a 0 for that as well. And then your payments per year and your compoundings per year are both 1. So at this point, if I hit enter, I need to be sitting on what it is I want to know, which is the future value. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't hit enter. Notice that it says solve above this button in green. So you have to hit the green button and then enter, and it will give you the future value. Same thing on this one. I put my cursor on the one that I want to know. And again, on the 84, trying to get it to where you can see the whole thing. You look above the enter key, solve is in green, so I'm going to press the green button and then the enter key. And now the easiest way to handle that is for me to come and look and see exactly where you are. That's turning TV and solver. So now there's pressure on it, future value is 0. second, or not second, but alpha, or nothing.
Investing makes sense, but savings doesn't.
Leave on your.
I guess it's because you're not really supposed to have access to it.
Green button.
Right, like you negative, physical
Yeah.
$1,000.
Yeah.
No, no payment, so there are no payments. You're only gonna pay one time. That's your
No, it's
upfront.
supposed to.
I figured it out.
Figure it out.
The reason
Anybody
why
else
it's-
need help?
the reason why it's going on negative here is negative 1,000. So like, if you put it negative 1,000.
Navigate. Okay, TV installer is already selected. Billing values.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because like, when you're putting in the savings account, it shouldn't be.
But you paid it.
Push it down there.
Did you see the rest of this chapter?
And then the present value. No.
Well, the thing is like, this, because of this program and stuff, like, this kind of finance.
Oh, yeah.
All you need is N and you can find whatever, you know.
And since the comp payments for your comp payments is one,
Yeah, I think
you get the one versus green.
the wording.
Interrupt, so just green, so the interrupt is salt.
The X fund and stuff.
Okay. Yes, we have. Green button.
Basically, just had a fun formula of giving $1,000 to the $30,000 finance. $20 per interest. So if you finance 5% interest.
So,
Y'all okay?
is the reason why it's coming out negative because we're supposed to enter negative 1,000?
Yeah, actually it is. I didn't catch that when I went through.
Yeah, because like it says in the next problem that like when investing or depositing money into an account, you're supposed to enter PV as negative.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, the one thing that I did not tell you correctly is that your present value needs to be negative. So that when you do your alpha and enter to get it to solve, your future value comes out positive. Your present value and your future value have to have opposite signs. Okay? They have to have opposite signs. And your future value is gonna come out positive, your present value is gonna be negative. Okay? Now, if you forget to enter the negative sign on the present value, and it tells you there's a negative future value, just ignore it. It's just that the way the calculator's set up, they have to have opposite signs. So if you enter a positive and get a negative, well, okay, they're not gonna take the money away from you at the end, they're still gonna give it to you, okay?
Would it work the opposite if you were making payments, like a mortgage?
Yes,
You would put positive for the,
you would put negative for your present value, the total mortgage amount, you know, what you're gonna pay for the house, and then your future value would be positive and your payments would be positive. But payments and future value have opposite signs,
oh,
okay?
so I was thinking like depending on what side of the equation you're on would determine that sign.
Yeah, well, it kind of does.
you have
Kind
to
of
worry about
does.
that if you're doing it by hand, but usually with the calculator, as long as you know that there's supposed to be opposite signs.
Yeah, as long as you know there's supposed to be opposite signs, you don't really have to worry about what's positive, what's negative. Just, you know, kind of like ignore the signs because the number comes out to be the same. Okay, let's look at another one. Compound interest, second example. You inherited an estate of $40,000, you want to invest it. So you're gonna invest it at an APR of 8.5% for 30 years. This is actually not any different from taking out a loan at an APR of 8.5% for 30 years.
I'm already thinking like, yeah, I'm trying to find an interest rate that high on savings account.
Have fun trying to find an interest rate that high. $40,000 is no problem.
Yeah.
You know, you can buy some cars and it's gonna be $40,000. So you wanna determine the accumulated balance. Okay. 30 years compounded annually. And you might actually find that 8.5% compounded annually. But most places don't compound annually. Okay, 30 years compounded annually, you're gonna make 30 payments. And those payments are coming in once a year. Your APR is 8.5%. You don't have to actually have the percent there, but you need to remember that you're entering it as a percent, not a decimal. Your present value is what you invested to start with. And since it is an investment, strictly speaking, you should put it in as a negative. Although if you don't put it as a negative, just ignore the signs. Okay? Your future value is what you want to know. Notice it doesn't say anything about payments. So we leave that out. But the future value is what you want to know. So then the last thing that we need to put in is how many payments per year, how much compounding per year. Well, it says it's compounded annually. So once a year. Once a year. Keep in mind, these have to match. Annually means that's one time a year. So then on the calculator, which mine has turned itself off, this is going to be 30 years, 8.5% interest, with a present value or initial deposit of, and again, that needs to be negative, and that's $40,000. No payments. Future value is what I want to know, but payments per year is 1, compoundings per year is 1. So even though there's a number in there, all I need to do is hit alpha and the enter button, and it tells me that my future value for this loan or this investment, depending on which it is, my future value is $462,000. $330.07. Okay? So you started out with $40,000 and wind up with over 10 times that much. But that's because the interest rate is very, very high and it was in there for 30 years. It's a long time. Okay? Questions on that one? Okay, let's look at one more example. $2,000 deposit. So change your deposit amount to $2,000, present value. Your interest rate is 3%. So you enter 3 for the interest rate. And it says daily compounding for 5 years. Okay, there are 365 days in a year. Times 5 years. And you do not have to multiply this out before you do it. You go up here and you say 365 days a year times 5 years. Now when you hit enter from there, it tells you how many times it's compounded. Okay? So you don't have to multiply it out before you go to this table. You can actually go to the table and put in the multiplication, and it'll figure that out for you.
Okay, why do we have to do it on that one?
Why do we have to do?
Why do we have to do 365 times 5?
Because it says daily compounding. So
Okay.
it compounds every day. And there's 365 days in most years. In leap year it's 366, but. Okay? Now, you're not making any payments, so you're gonna leave that at 0. Or you can just leave it blank, it doesn't matter what you have there. The future value is what we want to know. So how many compoundings are there per year? 365, because it compounds every day. And since these have to match, then they both have to be 365. So if you paid attention there, when I entered payments for year 365, that means they're paying me interest 365 times each year. And then the compoundings is actually how many times they calculate that.
Is it safe to say that n should be multiplied by whatever number is your payments or
Annual.
compound?
Yeah.
Okay, because with the continuous one, I was wondering that too, because like, I kind of looked ahead to the continuous one, I think it's 2 columns down.
Yeah.
And I was getting next to nothing on it, so I'm wondering, like, with continuous, the number is 52560, so you just multiply 5 by that if it's continuous.
So when you hit enter, your alpha and enter, you need to be on your future value. And you get $2,323.65. Everybody okay so far? Okay, we're probably not going to quite finish this because there's still a couple more examples. I think we'll pick up and finish this up next time. Let me look and see how much we still have left.
I think this is Good Friday, but
Yeah, I'll move the date out on this one. Okay, yeah, we'll finish this one up next time.
So what do we need to have done?
Unit 1, Unit 2, Lesson 1. That's your homework assignment, Unit 2, Lesson 1. And go ahead and print out your calculator help sheet. And then the others are just basically when you're trying to work problems, there's a calculator practice sheet. And it basically has you fill in the values for the problems.